want you to imagine two women. One's 84. She's completely blind. She can't attend church. She can actually barely leave the house. The other's 82. She's so crippled by arthritis that she walks bent over, nearly doubled over. Between them, they have nothing. They have no platform, no microphone, no influence, no access. All they have is a promise from God that He would pour water on the thirsty and floods on the dry ground. And so they prayed twice a week from 10 at night until 3 or 4 in the morning. They would pray in an unheated cottage in the middle of a Scottish winter on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. They prayed and God heard them. This is the story of Peggy and Christine Smith, and this is the story of the last great revival Scotland has ever seen. The year is 1949. The Second World War has been over for 4 years. But the Hebrides Islands, that chain of rugged, wind-battered islands off the northwest coast of Scotland, they're still carrying the weight of the war. The two world wars had taken a devastating toll on the island's population, particularly the young men. Families had lost their fathers, sons, brothers. An entire generation had been swallowed by the machinery of war. And the ones who came home, they came home different. They were hollowed out. They were searching. They were unable to find their way back to God or just back to peace. The churches had no choirs, they had no organs, they had no musical instruments, no padded seats. There were no meetings for young people, no children's program. Very few people had cars, and not a single person was attending church services. The chapels, the same chapels that had once been the heartbeat of island life in the Hebrides, the same chapels where generations of island families had been born into faith and buried from it, they were emptying out. A whole generation was walking away. And there was deep concern among the adults about the desperate spiritual condition of the churches. The ministers knew it, the elders knew it, but knowing the problem and being able to fix it, as you know, they're two very different things. And in the middle of all of this, in a tiny cottage by the side of the road in a village, in the village of Barvis on the Isle of Lewis, two old women got on their knees and began to pray. Peggy and Christine Smith were 84 and 82 years old. Peggy was blind and her sister had almost bent doubled over with arthritis, unable to attend a public worship. Their humble cottage became the sanctuary where they met with God. Think about the theology of that for a moment. They couldn't go to church, so they had turned their home into one. They couldn't attend church, so they decided that they would just be the church. They had every reason to accept their limitations, to say, we've done our part, we're too old, we're too broken, let the younger ones carry this. Let those that have energy and life and don't have arthritis and aren't blind do it. They had every reason to simply just wait quietly for heaven. But instead, they grabbed hold of a promise from Isaiah 44. Or maybe more particularly, that promise grabbed hold of them. I will pour water upon him that is thirsty and floods on the dry ground. And they prayed it back to God week after week, night after night. Twice a week they got on their knees at 10 in the evening and they prayed there until 3 or 4 in the morning. two old women in a very humble cottage. In the cold, in the dark, in the silence of the Scottish night. I want you to sit with that image for a moment, because I think this is one of the most extraordinary images in revival history. Not a crowd of thousands, not a famous preacher on a stage, not a well-funded campaign, just two elderly women, one blind, one crippled, kneeling in the cold. And the God of the universe, the God who created the stars over the Atlantic, who carved those islands out of the sea, that God leaned down and listened. After weeks of praying like this, Peggy had a vision. And in that vision, she saw the church, the same church she could no longer attend, the same church that stood empty week after week. She had a vision of seeing it packed to the doors with young people. And there was a stranger in the pulpit, a minister she didn't know. Peggy sent for her minister, Reverend James Murray Mackay, and she told him, she said this, she said, "We sense the Lord is going to send revival. You must get your church leaders together and spend every Tuesday and Friday night in prayer. And my sister and I will pray simultaneously in our cottage." The minister could have dismissed her. She was 84 and blind. He could have thought, this is one of those cuckoo people in the church. What did she know? Why would I listen to her? But he didn't. He called the elders and the deacons, the church leadership together, and they began to pray. Not in a heated church hall, not in a comfortable room. They gathered in a barn, an unheated barn in the Scottish winter, and they prayed. One night, having begun at about 10 in the evening, a young deacon from the Free Church, that was the name of it, read Psalms 24 and challenged everyone to be clean before God. Who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. The words landed like a stone in still water. One by one, the men began to examine their hearts, to confess what was hidden, to get honest before God in a way that religious performance never required. As they waited on God, his awesome presence swept over them in the barn. This is at 4 in the morning. They had started praying at 10. 6 hours later, God came. Some things take longer than we'd like them to take. Now, Peggy needed the stranger from her vision, and she had a name. That name was Duncan Campbell. Campbell was a traveling evangelist who, in 1949, he felt called to rejoin the faith mission, where he was working in the Isle of Skye, and he thoroughly engaged in the work when he received the call to go to the Isle of Lewis. He said no. He was busy. He had commitments. He had a plan. But then something happened. The doors he had been walking through in Skye began to close, opening the opportunity for him to go to this place. He changed his plans. He arrived at Barvis. And this is something worth pausing on. How often has God redirected us by closing doors that we were sure were the right one? How often has the thing that we were absolutely certain was the plan turned out to be the detour, not the destination? Duncan Campbell arrived on Lewis reluctantly, not triumphantly. He came not as a conquering hero, but as a man who had finally ran out of excuses. And I believe that God uses that. Campbell's first night meeting at the local church, it was packed. People crying out to God even before the service began. The meeting ran deep into the night. And as it finally wound towards an end, a young man stood up and prayed. Not politely, not cautiously, but with a kind of holy boldness that only comes when someone has run out of religious pretense. He said these, "Oh God, you made a promise to pour water on the thirsty land and floods on the dry ground, and you are not doing it." He was holding God to his word, wrestling with God in the public, with everyone watching. And as a result, the Spirit of God fell mightily on that meeting. The meeting continued until the early hours of the morning. Then as Campbell finally prepared to leave, after the first exhausting and extraordinary night, he was invited to an all-night prayer meeting in a nearby cottage. He just finished a meeting that had nearly run through the night, and he said yes. 30 people gathered for prayer. Campbell described it like this: God was beginning to move. The heavens were opening. We were there on our faces before God. 3 o'clock in the morning came and God swept in. And a dozen men and women lay prostrate on the floor, speechless. Something had happened. We knew that the forces of darkness were going to be driven back and men were going to be delivered. And when they left the cottage, Campbell walked along the country road and found 3 men on their faces, crying to God for mercy. There was a light in every home. No one seemed to think of sleep. Every house lit up at 3 a.m., not because the people had set their alarms, not because anyone had knocked on their doors, but because the presence of God had moved through the village like a tide. No one could sleep through it. That is not evangelism. That is not program. That is God. I want to tell you some of the specific story from these islands because the details matter, because the details are where you feel the reality of what God was doing. And my prayer is that it wouldn't just inspire you. My prayer is that it would burden you to see this in your own life, in my city, in your city, in our nations again. In one village, a whole family came to faith in a single night. A father, a mother, 2 daughters and a son. But one of the daughters was a medical professional in London. That night she was walking down Oxford Street after seeing a patient. She was suddenly arrested by the power of God right there on one of the busiest streets in the world. She found a room and she cried out to God for mercy, and God saved her right there. The same night, her family was saved in the Hebrides, hundreds of miles away. The family did not know about each other until after. The Spirit of God had moved on the entire family, all at the same time, simultaneously across the length of Britain. Duncan Campbell writes about this story. These are facts. Then there's this one story of a 15-year-old boy among those converted during the revival. He was 15 years old who became an outstanding helper, and he was like a frontline prayer warrior. And Duncan called at his home one day and he found him on his knees in the barn praying. The Bible was open before him. When interrupted quietly, he said, "Excuse me." This is what he says quietly. "Excuse me a little, Mr. Campbell. I'm having an audience with the King." He was 15 years old, having an audience with the King. Some of the most vivid outpourings of the Spirit came when this boy was asked to pray. In the police station in Barvis, he stood up one night, clasped his hands and uttered one word: Father. Everyone was melted to tears as the presence of God invaded the entire room. One word from a teenager, and the presence of God fell upon a police station. This is what revival looks like. It doesn't need the most impressive people or platforms or pulpits. It just needs yielded people. I need to tell you something about Peggy Smith. I want to tell you this because it's stayed with me since I first read about her story. There's an account of Duncan Campbell feeling that he shouldn't go into a particular village, a village where there was significant opposition to his ministry. And mental note, like, part of the stuff that I'm leaving out is the amount of opposition that happens when revival breaks out. Like, it sounds good to be Evan Roberts and Duncan Campbell and all these other revivalists, but you better be ready to be in a war. Peggy approaches him and she tells him we should go. And he pushes back. We have no meetings there, he says. People were opposing him and he just couldn't see a way in. And so Peggy looks at him and says, Mr. Campbell, if you were as near to God as you ought to be, he would reveal his secrets to you also. And then she prayed right in front of him. Lord, you remember what you told me this morning? That in this village, you're going to save 7 men who will become pillars in the church of my fathers. Lord, I have given your message to Mr. Campbell, and it seems he is not prepared to receive it. Oh Lord, give him wisdom, because he badly needs it. This is the prayer of this 80-something-year-old woman. Well, Duncan Campbell, the evangelist, the preacher, the man of God who had come to lead the revival, he was being corrected by an 84-year-old woman, and she was right. Campbell agreed to go, and he arrives at the village at 7 o'clock. And they found a large kind of bungalow, crowded to capacity, with many people assembled outside, right? God had gone ahead and prepared the congregation before any human announcement had been made. 7 men were saved, just as Peggy said. The woman who couldn't leave her cottage was leading and directing the revival from her knees. The Stornoway Gazette reported they said this, more are attending the prayer meetings in Lewis today than attended public worship on the Sabbath before outbreak of this revival. Dance halls and drinking houses were closed. They're like our pubs and clubs and parties. Family worship was being restored to homes. Prayer meetings ran 5 and 6 nights a week. After 2.5 years, of all the hundreds who had turned to Christ in that first wave, only 4 had ceased to attend prayer meetings. In revival history, the fruit that lasts is always the most important test, and this fruit lasted. Over 80 hymns were composed by new converts. The central doctrine of nearly all of them was the love of God. People who had never sung before were singing hymns. People who had never prayed in public were leading prayer meetings that ran until dawn. The world that Peggy and Christine had prayed, the world that they'd prayed over and were praying for, was being rebuilt from the inside out. Duncan Campbell himself, reflecting on everything that he had said, gave this summary at the Keswick Convention in 1952. He says these words, "We may organize, we may plan, but until we get our faces to do business with a covenant-keeping God, we shall not see revival." We may organize, we may plan. And here's the thing about that quote that I can't shake. It wasn't said as a criticism of the church. It was said as a confession of a reality. Even by the men who had seen the Hebrides Revival, seen God move more powerfully, and most people, more than most people ever will. Even he walked away saying the only thing that works is getting on your face before God. Everything else is peripheral. And here, as we close, is what I need you to hear. The Hebrides Revival was not launched by celebrity. It was not funded by a denomination. It was not the result of brilliant strategy or a well-executed marketing plan. It wasn't because someone went viral. It was the result of two women, one blind, one bent over with arthritis, who decided that the promises of God were worth taking literally. They lived on an island on the edge of the world. They had no influence by any metric the world uses to measure influence. They couldn't even get a church, but they could pray. And they prayed with ferocity and faithfulness that most full-time ministers would never even approach. From 10 until midnight, from 10 at night until 4 in the morning, in an unheated cottage, in a Scottish winter, for weeks, for months, because they believed that God keeps his promises. That he who says he is who he says he is. That the same God who moved in Acts is the God who moves in 1949 on a wind-battered Scottish island. If only there are people who are willing to believe him for it today. People all over those islands had the sense that God was telling them and speaking to them and saying, ask me for revival. It was divinely orchestrated hunger, not manufactured, not working up, but sovereignly planted in their hearts. And I want to ask you, do you have that hunger? Not for an experience, not for an emotional moment, not for good church services, but for God himself, for his actual presence, for his actual power, for his actual glory moving through your city, moving through your family, moving for your generation. Because that hunger is not something you can manufacture, but it is something that you can ask for. Peggy Smith, an 84-year-old, completely blind, kneeling on a cold floor in the middle of the night, and she moved the nation. Not with the words, not with words to the right people, not with access to the right rooms, not with money or strategy or talent, but with prayer, just with prayer. And I want to read you the promise that she and Christine held on to through those nights. Isaiah 44 verse 3. I will pour water on the thirsty land, and on the streams on the dry ground. I will pour out my spirit on your offspring. I will and my blessing on your descendants. That promise is for you right now, today. And if you feel dry, if you feel like your generation looks lost to you, your family looks lost to you, that promise is a promise that you should start praying right now. If you've been praying for something for years and seen nothing, that promise is for you. God has not forgotten you. God has not changed his mind. He has not run out of power, friend. He's looking for the same thing. He's looking for the same thing he was looking for in 1949 on a Scottish island. Two people, even one person who will believe him and hold him to his word. And right now, I want to invite you to pray that prayer. God, I believe in you. I believe your promises are true. Would you pour out water on the thirsty? I am thirsty. Pour out your spirit, not just on me, on my family, on my city, on my nation, on this generation. I will not stop asking until I see it. That's the prayer of Peggy Smith, and that's the prayer that changed Hebrides, and it can be yours too. Don't walk away the same.